Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing, especially if you like old cars like this, 1964 or 1965, I can't remember right now, Jaguar S-Type. And if you're new, you might not know why I got this. This is a parts car for a restoration I'm doing on a 1966 one. It's a very long-term restoration, but this parts car came up nearby and it was close to being free. Just had to pay to basically get it delivered here, and a small fee to the owner, more of a symbolic gesture. And it's always good to have a parts car when you're restoring something. And when I got it, I was thinking, you know what, maybe I can use this engine instead, because my car originally is a 3.4. This is a 3.4 automatic like mine was originally, but throughout the years mine has lost its gearbox and mine doesn't have the correct engine. It has a 3.8, which is a more powerful engine. It's correct, it's 1966 engine. However, it's from a Mark II, which really doesn't matter. But I don't know, I was going to see which engine I'm using. The other one needs some work as well. It's up in the workshop. We can have a look at that at the end of the video. That one I believe does turn over, but it has two snap spark plugs in the head, so it will need to be taken apart anyways, and of course gone through with most likely new bearings and all of those things. But the last time we saw this car was about a month or so ago, when we realized that the engine is quite seized. We'll have a look inside with a borescope. It looks very, very rusty, but I've tried all the methods to see if we can actually get this thing unstuck. I've tried ATF, acetone mix, diesel, and a few other things, and so far it still seems to be stuck about a month later, which is really no surprise when it's been, in this condition since sometime in the 70s. But I thought we would see once again if I can get it unstuck. If not, well, that's where this ends. It will be taken apart later, but we'll talk about that, see what happens, and we'll may open it up a little bit, just take off the cam covers and see what it looks like inside. I don't know that much about the car, more that it's been off the road since the early 70s, and I do not know when the intake was taken off and all of that. All I know is that most of that time it's been sitting inside, but it's been outside for the past couple of years. And when you hear that, that's always, that's not 2 years, that's more like 5 or 10 years. So with the intake off and the exhaust down there, I mean, it's very easy for moisture to come in there and block things up. The rear cylinders were the ones that looked quite crusty inside, very much reminiscent of the Titanic. So I've tried a few things, long breaker bars up here, trying to get it to move. The plugs are just in there quite loosely. They're just to not get any more debris down in there. I've also tried another trick, which is to basically shock the engine with the starter just for a second to see if it moved. Got the starter going. First it was just spinning and not engaging. Then I got it to engage and it just went shong, and it didn't even turn the engine. It went back. So I'm not going to do any more of that to not damage the starter or any of that more. But I thought I'd give that a try, because sometimes you can knock them loose, just 1, 2 for something, and then that's enough for you to start working them up here on the crank. But this one is fully stuck, but I'll demonstrate once more just for fun how stuck it is. And yeah, I don't think we're going to get any further with this, but let's try it one more time. Got a long breaker bar here. I have also tried with an extra length on the breaker bar, just put a pipe on it, but I don't want to do too much, because also I don't want to damage the front of the crank. But if you can see here, I mean, I'm just rocking the engine. It is completely stuck, and if I go the other way, I will just undo the front crank nuts. So yeah, I mean, even if I'm actually just bending my breaker bar, or flexing it. So definitely very stuck. However, when I had a look inside here, I can still see a little bit of oil up in the cans, but I thought, you know what, let's have a closer look just for fun, seeing if it's completely rusty or crusty up here. I have no idea. I mean, the front breather here has been off. So let's take one of these off. I brought up a rubber mallet and a wrench, so we should be able to get this off. If I remember correctly, these are 7/16, and they shouldn't be very tight at all. That was nice. They're not. If you're unlucky, a previous owner or a mechanic has tightened these way too tight. And what can happen then is they will crack between here. I believe it's not as common with these as it is with the later ribbed one, which I think are a little thinner material between here. But if that happens, well, you basically just throw them away and find another set, because they'll leak oil up through here and it will be no fun at all. But they're all coming off really nicely. And even if this engine ends up being, let's see, this ends up being completely junk, things like the cam covers here are worth keeping, because you might know someone that has some damaged ones. And even if they look like this, I mean, they can be polished up and look really nice. As long as they have no big dents or anything in them, they can look like new after just a few hours, or a lot of hours of polishing. There should be copper washers under here sealing them. But I can see one there, but I'm not sure if they're still there or if they're just, I think they're just very, very compressed. And I'm not going to be too careful with these dome nuts because, as you see, they're all rusty and these are extremely cheap to buy new. And this is quite common as well, that you just pull out everything, stud as well. But you can see the chrome finish or whatever is on them is just flaking off. So they're not worth keeping. Couple gentle taps with a rubber mallet usually gets them off. There we go. That's starting to sound loose. Here you see the washers. They're just very old and thin and smushed, but they were actually there. And yeah, that is kind of crusty looking. Let's flip this over. Quite a bit of buildup in there. So the other engine I have is definitely in much, much better shape than this one. This looks like, yeah, whoever had this car was not really big on servicing. But as we can see, the cams are, and there is some light surface corrosion on there, which, I mean, you can send that off and have that polished away. But yeah, that looks kind of crusty on the inside and really, really dark. So maybe this engine actually isn't the one I want to use, or a candidate for what I'm going to do with it. But just for fun, let's remove the other side as well and have a look at that. This side actually came off a little easier. It's just 2 taps in the back and everything loosened up, but I haven't had a look yet. What are your guesses? It's going to be the same as the other side or worse? I'm guessing pretty much the same, or maybe, yeah. It is pretty much exactly the same. However, just for fun, I mean, I just have a glove on. That all does, I mean, polish off. I mean, these would probably have to be reground. But, yeah. So that's what I could see from the oil filler. I could see oil down there. And that made me to believe that, maybe it's not that bad, but there's no oil on that side at all. But it's a nice to have a look inside an XK engine. We've had a look at a similar one before inside, a much newer one in my 75 XJ6, but that was a Series 3, so an 80s engine. And if you remember correctly, it had 4 bolts holding the camshaft onto the cam sprocket, and they had lock washers. And this is what the early ones had. So you see locking wire instead on both of them. But interesting enough, you see they've done it differently. On this side, they've looped around, and on that side, they've done it that way. And this side definitely came off easier, so I think this side has been off, much more recently in this car's history to possibly have a look at something. And the other side maybe has been on there since the car was new, or just a lot longer. Interesting though that the two different mechanics have been in here. So this is the end of videos on this engine for now. It will be removed from the car. I'm not going to scrap the engine because it might be restorable. It most likely it is. I mean, I've seen videos of worse engines than this being restored, but I'm not going to throw it away. At least I will be removing it with the transmission, but that will probably not happen until later in the summer or after summer, because getting this all apart down here where it's loose rocks and I can't really get my engine hoist down there, I will need to borrow my neighbor's tractor to be able to lift this out. And it's summer here and they're using it every single day to be out in the fields and do things. So probably when they're done with all of that, I'll ask if I can borrow it for a day or so and then get this out. So I'm just put the covers back on loosely, cover everything up and leave it here for now. It's not going to get any worse, but definitely this is not something that we're going to get unstuck. But I think it was a fun experiment to try, because sometimes you see engines that have been sitting for 40 or 50 years and then they can get them to spin around. This one definitely has had water intrusion somehow, either just from creeping in or I'm not sure. It did look really bad inside one of those cylinders in the previous one. Almost looked there was a hole in it in the piston, which I don't know. It's hard to tell on a cheap little borescope what it actually is, but it didn't look good at all. But let me know if you want once all this is removed, because I do want to see if I can use the transmission. But would you guys think it'd be fun sometime in the fall or something to see this thing opened up, see if you can even get it apart and seeing how bad it is inside, and if it's just not worth doing, or if you can actually turn it into a nice engine. But I thought we'd end this video by going up to the workshop and have a look at my 3.8 and actually test if it spins over. I believe it does, if I remember correctly. I think I've tested it once, but let's see if it does. I'm not going to spin a complete revolution. I just want to see if it moves at all, just because there might be just because the plugs aren't really out of it, because two of them are snapped off. But let's go up there and have a look at that engine. We're up in the workshop, and here in the back corner is the engine I removed from my 1966 car that I'm restoring. It is a 3.8. And yeah, I don't really know that much about it, except that it ran a couple of years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And that's about it. And the only thing I did was I had plans to see if I could actually start it up. So I removed the plugs, and I've never felt plugs as stuck as these. It's the worst I've ever experienced, and I tried pretty much everything I could. However, one of them just snapped off. And I mean, I waited weeks and used different types of penetrating fluid and everything. So you see it snapped clean off in there. So it's all the threads and stuff are in there. At that point, I sort of gave up on that idea and realized that, you know what, even if this thing were to fire up, I still want to go through it, because when you restore the whole car, the last thing you want is, shine up the engine and then drive it for a couple months and something terrible happens. So then I knew I was going to remove it anyways. And when I did that, we just took one of the covers off, just to have a look at it, and you can compare what this one looks inside. If I remember correctly, it was quite nice and clean. So you can see this engine's been sitting pretty much as long. Been started up maybe once or twice in that time, since sometime in the 70s. But it looks immaculate inside. And just have a look inside that cam cover. I mean, this is an excellent looking engine inside. So it's more and more leaning towards that this will be the one I will use, with possibly a transmission from that car. But we'll see about that. But this one is definitely pretty nice inside. But let's just see, for just pure fun, if this thing actually turns. I am not going to turn it a full revolution or anything if it does, just because I can't get lubrication into all of the cylinders due to that. But I do have my long breaker bar here, so let's just see what happens. All right, try and do this one-handed, which may be a little bit difficult. There we go. Now let's see if this turns at all. Yeah, you see that turn pretty easily. and back the other way. This was a bad idea to do this one-handed, but I want to show you guys. Yeah, it turns really nicely both ways. So this is definitely a very restorable engine. So this will probably be the one I use, but I think I will take the other one apart just for fun in the fall and see how bad that one is inside, and if that is just go into the scrap heap or if something can be done about it. And that's it for this video. You know, sometimes things don't go perfectly. You know, you see a lot of people who find engines sitting in fields and they seem to just be able to turn over, which maybe that does happen sometimes, but definitely not in this case. That thing is stuck solid. I'm guessing that even once it starts taking apart, it will take quite a bit of force to get those pistons out of there if they're as corroded as I think they are. So that will sit for a while I'm doing other things. So you might be able to see we do have a couple of V12s in here, actually 3 V12s here up in the shop, and they're all getting a little bit of work done to them, and you will see that in future videos. I'm working on 2 videos at the moment with them. We got one car which is pretty much just going off to get inspected or an MOT, which is the XJS. It's one slight little issue with it, just a very minor thing which we'll go through in a future video. I am working on this customer's Daimler 66 behind me, which be a long video on that as well. Over here is my 1977 XJ12. It's up on jack stands, if you can see, because I am tackling the fuel lines and everything in the back to the tanks. It's all going to be brand new, and there will be a video on that as well. So then you know what's coming up in the future. And as well, I'm working on the V8S type, waiting on some parts. That hose I broke for the transmission and a couple other gaskets, and everything should go back together and hopefully go in a lot easier than it came out. Anyways, if you like this video, please give a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. Anyways, until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.